my name is Ruby, and today we'll be exploring the concept of colonisation, specifically British colonisation of Australia, the misunderstandings surrounding the nature of colonisation that occurred, and the impact that British colonisation has had on Indigenous peoples. And we'll be doing this through exploring an artwork by Daniel Boyd, an Indigenous artist. So firstly, according to Michael Summer, colonisation is linked to the actions of invading and seizing of land. The arrival of British colonisers, in particular Captain James Cook in the late 1700s, marked the beginning of the oppression that Indigenous Australians would face, forcing them into a world completely unnatural and ways of living and being that were completely foreign to their way of life. According to Cranstone, Indigenous Australians occupied the continent for more than 65,000 years prior to the arrival of British settlers, living in harmony with the land. Harrison and Selwood suggest that the concept of colonisation is probably the most important concept in terms of indigeneity because as a result of colonisation, a number of things occurred, impacting on the lives of Indigenous peoples, with some including the deprivation of cultural connections, separation from land, family and kinship groups, a lost sense of identity leading to the identity crisis that many Indigenous people have faced, dispossession and discrimination, and with the effects of these, Harrison and Selwood revealing still being. In my understanding, colonisation is one of the most miscommunicated concepts in terms of indigeneity, as from my experience, I was taught in school that the timeline of Australia started with the arrival of Captain James Cook and his peaceful discovery of Australia, something that I now know is completely untrue and something that artist Daniel Boyd depicts as far from the truth in his artwork. We call them pirates out here.
Daniel Boyd is an Indigenous artist who created this artwork in order to mock and challenge the subjective history that has been created surrounding the discovery of Australia. Boyd's artwork not only reflects his cultural identity, but also recognises Indigenous views on colonisation. As such, Boyd's artwork is ultimately a parody of Emmanuel Philip Fox's 1902 painting, which we see here, that allegedly depicts the landing of Captain Cook in Botany Bay. And so, Boyd appropriates key elements of Fox's artwork in order to get this from this.
The title alone, we call them pirates out here, acknowledges that Indigenous peoples were already here with their own culture, their own language, ways of life, values and beliefs, well and truly before British settlers arrived, as mentioned by Harrison and Selwood. And B, well, we know the connotations associated with the word pirate aren't nice. They are evil, selfish, predator-like. They're people who rob and steal from others for their own self-gain. So ultimately, Boyd is aligning the actions of such British colonisers with that of a pirate.
The pirate features that Boyd utilises allows him to depict Cook as a mutilating pirate who claims possession of the land with his skull and crossbones Union Jack, which in turn contrasts the heroic and civilised character that has been portrayed over time. So in Boyd's painting, Cook becomes the anti-hero, and whilst I am not an Indigenous person, it is quite easy to see why they thought this way. His landing marked the beginning of invasion and pillage that Indigenous people would face, and the start of the deprivation of their culture and their way of life. And obviously, Boyd's depiction of Cook as a pirate hasn't emerged out of nowhere. Instead, it has been influenced by the fact that post-Cook's arrival, according to Harrison and Selwood, Indigenous populations faced a plethora of diseases in which they were not immune to, the stripping of their land, their culture and their identity, planned poisonings and pollutings of water in a bid to eradicate entire Indigenous populations, and a string of violence, murders and planned massacres again to reduce population.
All in which are actions that completely contradict the white perception of a passive takeover of land, the type of colonisation that many naively teach and that many naively believe. Thus, by utilising his visual artwork and mocking of Fox's initial depiction of the arrival of Captain Cook, Boyd is challenging the many false notions of colonisation and therefore encourages his audience to do the same. Therefore, I really find that Boyd utilises his Indigenous perspectives perpetrated in his artworks in order to challenge the many false notions of colonisation that pervade a society that is dominated by white views, opinions and beliefs. So we can take a lot from Boyd's artwork, including the fact that we must be open to considering and hearing the views of minority groups instead of always believing and adopting the truths created by majority groups. So in this case, Boyd is encouraging us to take into consideration the Indigenous interpretation and understanding of colonisation before believing views of colonisation that are perpetrated by a white society.
So thanks so much for listening, and I hope that you have taken something and have learnt something from this presentation today.